'Tis the season for lots of toys and gifts, and chances are at least one of the toys under your tree was made close to home. Leah Martin takes a look.
Transformers, Nerf, G.I. Joe, Monopoly, and the Game of Life. Many of the world's most famous toys have roots right outside your door.
We're standing in the Salem Stories exhibition.
On display at the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts, is the story of George S. Parker, the founder of Parker Brothers, and lots of board games we still play today.
Monopoly is probably the best known. They started out with things like Risk, games like Clue, games that have a degree of risk-taking or a bit of a spirit of competition.
And a competitor got his start about 100 miles away in Springfield.
Milton Bradley is a company that was formed in Massachusetts in 1860. They had games that everybody knows today. The Game of Life, Candyland, Chutes and Ladders, Battleship, Connect 4, the big iconic spinner, and all of the different things you would have to do, like get a job.
And Charlene Deloach of the Toy Insider says board games have never been more important.
They really can enhance learning. Every child and every family can get what they need and that unique play experience out of it.
Both Milton Bradley and Parker Brother brands now live just across the border of Attleboro in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, at the home of a famous potato head, Hasbro.
So the first Mr. Potato Head or Potato Head product actually started off as parts, and a child would bring it home back in the 1950s and put those parts into an actual potato. It evolved over time into a boxed product.
By the 1960s, Hasbro was ready to compete with Barbie when G.I. Joe got his call of duty.
G.I. Joe, fighting man from head to toe.
The 60s had your 12-inch G.I. Joes, the dolls, more like, even though a lot of guys or collectors don't like to call them dolls, they're action figures.
That line was very successful, but decades later, kids were ready for something new.
That's Dial Tone!
And at the Outpost Defender, that's Leatherneck.
It was relaunched in the 80s in a totally different way. G.I. Joe versus Cobra and Good and Evil.
The figures, now much smaller, were a huge hit. And James Zahn of the Toy Insider says they had a broad appeal.
This was one of the first toy lines that really had a diverse cast of characters for kids to play with. There were men, there were women, there were different ethnicities at play, there were different nationalities involved. That was something that no one else was really doing at the time.
For more than a decade, Hasbro created some of the most memorable toys of all time.
I think '86 is when they released the USS Flag. It was a 6-foot-long aircraft carrier. You could put 100 Joes and a full-size plane on the aircraft carrier.
And the parade of good times in the 80s did not end there.
Optimus Prime to left! Watch out for Soundwave!
And then Transformers, of course. I've got Optimus Prime sitting next to me here in my office. 1984, those hit the scene, and they're rolling.
The Transformers story in the 80s is a phenomenal one. That was really an incredible introduction to the world of robots in disguise. And, you know, literally every car that passes you on the road, every truck that rumbles down the highway could be an Autobot or a Decepticon.
Transformers launched dozens of unforgettable characters into the pop culture zeitgeist.
All the classic heroes and villains like Megatron and Soundwave and Optimus Prime.
Chad Julian specializes in vintage toys at That's Entertainment in Worcester. He says Transformers has become an iconic toy line, often imitated but never replicated.
They had the GoBots, which were actually a precursor from Tonka, but they were just not as nearly as cool. They didn't have such intricate moving parts. They basically just like, arm, I'm a robot, you know?
And Hasbro's chief operating officer, Eric Nyman, says Transformers has a bright future.
So we're really excited to talk about what's next for Transformers in both the film universe as well as the animated storytelling universe. On the film side of things, we just announced in partnership with Paramount that the film will be launching in June of 2023. And on the animated side, they're working very closely with Paramount as well to create a whole new version of animated storytelling that will launch in the upcoming years. So lots of new Transformers stories.
That partnership with Paramount, owned by our parent company Viacom CBS, also saw success with the recent Snake Eyes movie.
Let's go.
And I think we're going to continue to see Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow continuing to battle in future years.
And toy experts believe Hasbro will be in the hearts of kids and adults for years to come.
Hasbro is something that you might be introduced when you're a child with that very first toy, but it's something that is a part of your life for your lifetime.
I do think that ultimately all roads do lead back to Rhode Island when it comes to the soul of Hasbro and who we are.
As Hasbro looks to the future, it is making strides to help combat climate change. They have an initiative to eliminate plastic from its packaging by the end of next year. I'm Liam Martin, CBSN Boston.